Welcome to the Medovia Menopause Podcast, your trusted source for information about menopause and midlife. Join us each episode as we have great conversations with great people. Tune in and enjoy the show.
Hey everyone, welcome back. Today we're diving into a conversation that feels especially powerful for women in midlife. This is the season where so many of us are navigating change, loss, reinvention, and the quiet unraveling and rebuilding of what happens inside. And our guest today is Laing Rikkers. Laing is the author of Morning Leaves, which is a stunning collection of poems and botanical art that she wrote in the early mornings following the sudden loss of her sister during COVID. Morning Leaves is a book about grief, but equally a book about becoming, about what happens when life cracks us open and invites us to grow in a new direction. You know, what makes Laing's work so resonant for midlife is the honesty in her metaphors. She writes of being a plum tree carrying generational memory, a cactus protecting its soft inner core, a black-eyed Susan rising through the concrete, which happened to be my favorite one, and a sprout emerging from the ashes. These are the emotional landscapes so many women walk through during this stage of life. Moments of burnout, resilience, awakening, tenderness, and profound clarity. Midlife asks us to let go of old identities, to listen more deeply, to reconnect with our intuition, and pay attention to what truly matters. Morning Leaves offers a way to name these seasons, to see ourselves in nature, and to remember that we're not alone in the transition. Laing's story is a reminder that healing isn't linear, creativity can be a lifeline, and the second half of life can blossom in ways we never expected. I'm so grateful to have her here today. Laing, welcome.
Thank you for having me. I'm really happy to be here.
Yeah. So your dedication cracked me open and whispered today, now, is something many midlife women feel even without a specific loss. So how do you see grief or major life changes as a midlife awakening, a moment that forces us to reassess priorities, identify what we want, and look at what the second half of life looks like? What did you experience there?
Well, in the dedication of my book, I was referencing the death of my sister, and that was for me a very particular kind of wake-up call, and it, coincided with my being in midlife. And so the whole experience of losing her and opening of the sort of door to self-reflection that kind of a loss brings happened to coincide with my being, at this particular stage of life. And it was a real opportunity to reflect on who I had been, what I'd been doing, what I'd been putting up with, what I needed to let go of and move away from. And the way in which my sister died very suddenly, I think also was this particular wake-up call of like, do it now. That was the urgency there of, what are you waiting for? Like, get with the program, girlfriend. You need to clean up a few things here, and you've been doing some things that are really not aligned with your values and not serving you. And so let's really dig into what I'm not sure that I was conscious that this is what I was doing, but now that I've had some distance from the whole experience, I think I really was saying to myself, we really need to look at all of who you are and what you're doing and what you care about, and do a little bit of realignment here. And so I was able to put it out in the botanical metaphors that I did. I don't know that I was brave enough to do it more directly than that, but my hope is that the metaphor also makes it more accessible and useful to other people. So precise.
I love metaphors. So I actually haven't had an opportunity to read your whole book of poems. So I'm looking forward to doing that, and was excited to just read through kind of cliff notes that Kim sent my way. I'm wondering though, you mentioned that you had a moment where you thought, who am I? to
Okay.
publish poetry and art. And I think, because your background wasn't in writing, right? It
Mhm.
was a career in business for those of you that aren't familiar with her work. And I think many midlife women have that new identity that they're adopting, or the new coat, if you will, that they're putting on at this different stage of life. And it can feel awkward. It's like a new pair of shoes, right? You put in a new pair of shoes and it feels a little bit strange because they're not broken in yet, right?
Yeah.
And I'm wondering if you can kind of take us through how you navigated through that discomfort of pursuing something different when your old identity really matched and aligned with what people thought you were, if that makes sense. And
Yeah,
and just to kind of
absolutely.
help others through that same stage.
Yes. Well, I had a little bit of the benefit of the COVID bubble. So my sister died in December of 19, was grieving, then lockdown, the isolation, and I started writing. And I both had a little bit more time, and the world was so different and quiet, right, at that moment. So the writing part, even though it was unfamiliar to me as a practice, I had the sort of space and privacy, maybe you'd say, to
Mm,
be able to do that. And similarly, when I started, so what happened was I started writing in the mornings, and I wasn't intending to write a book to begin with, but my sister had died um, with a 9-year-old daughter. And so I knew that she had not shared with her daughter everything as a mom that she would have wanted to. So I was really keenly aware of the idea that I might have things to share with my own kids, and what would those be. And this, mind you, was right when we were all hearing about people dropping dead in Italy
Yeah.
and soccer games.
yeah.
Like, this was a
Yeah.
very intense time for everyone. And
Hmm.
I just had the additional layer of the grief. So I had started organizing my my poems, really to type them up to give to my children,
Mm,
thinking that maybe this would shed some light on who I was, and I wanted them to know me. God forbid something happened to me.
hmm.
And in doing that, like I said earlier, there seemed to be something more universal there than just my own story. And so I started sharing it with some other friends who are professional writers. And is there something here? What do you think? And I think it really was that privacy of COVID. I was very uncomfortable with the idea of moving in this direction. I did have a very particular identity, and this was not it. And so,
Hmm.
and
Hmm.
it was, uh, I mean, I was been in private equity in New York, and it was very
Hmm.
serious and very male dominated and very um, particular. And then I had this book of, poetry about trees and spirituality, and
Hmm.
it felt uncomfortable to reveal myself that
Mm,
way.
mm,
And so every time I had a doubt, somehow the universe just kept giving me these signals where I would read something or someone would say something, and it felt like breadcrumbs. I was like, oh, I guess I have to
mm,
keep going. And I kept going, and I got encouragement from friends who said, no, no, you should keep going. Maybe you would add in an introduction, or maybe try this, or try, they gave me some suggestions along the way. But I had the ability to then keep moving forward. But it it was wildly uncomfortable. And I have an immense respect for artists, because when you
mm.
put your work out there and it's really personal, you're so vulnerable. And I
Yeah.
didn't realize, and I think that's true for any kind of artist, a musician or anyone. And so I would say to your listeners, who, if they are moving in this direction, that discomfort is very normal. And yet, if you push through it and you get to the other side, it's also so satisfying and
Mm,
rewarding, and to find the connection with people who identify with it,
mm.
even if it's just a couple of people, is really meaningful.
Yeah.
I
Just sit
love
with
the
it.
idea of breadcrumbs that you
Hmm.
followed them. And I think April and I experience this in the work that we do, because if we didn't follow them, it would haunt us. Like
Mm-hmm.
we have to follow this passion that we have in our hearts around menopause and midlife. And if we didn't, I don't think we both wouldn't know what we would be doing right now. Right. And
Mm-hmm.
you kept following the sort of your heart in this space and gave yourself permission to think outside the box, to do
Yeah.
something different. When you look back now, what do you think about the courage that it took for you to do that?
I'm really glad that I listened to my sort of inner
Mm-hmm.
compass, I would say. And that was really part of the journey, was the finding and listening to that compass. And so I'm very, very glad that I did it. And it looks and feels scary. And I've got the second edition of the book coming out in March, and it's scary all over again. So I think that that's just part of speaking your truth in the world and trying to be as honest with yourself as you possibly can means that you are exposed in a certain way. And I believe that it's worth doing that, but it doesn't mean that it doesn't feel scary at times.
That's not scary, right?
Yeah.
Or easy. Can you talk about what you added to the book for this second edition? Because I think that's probably one of the favorite parts
Mm.
of your book to me. It's where I was like, okay, I totally get this now.
Sure. So the first edition of the book, I can show you, this is the first edition, and it's called
So
Morning
beautiful.
Leaves, Reflections on Loss, Grief, and Connection. And the second edition, I have a new publisher, and she was brilliant. At first, we started talking about the book, and I said, are we thinking about this as a grief gift book, which is how it's really been in the world? And she said, yes, but this is actually a joy book. And I was like, oh, interesting. Same coin, flip side. And it opened up this whole different way of seeing things and thinking that was really helpful. And so the other thing that was important to both her and me was that right now there's so much grief culturally. It's not just death grief. There's political and environmental and et cetera, et cetera. So we wanted to open up the aperture to talk about all kinds of loss. So there's a preface now that is fairly brief, but it opens up this idea of loss in the broader sense, and that in order to find joy, it is available to all of us, but it's a choice, and that it takes work, and that it is effort. And it's not the sort of sparkle of happiness. It's that very deliberate decision to live according to, what you view as, sort of integrity and values. And that in doing that, you really can find a deeper sense of joy. And then so that's the first part that's new. There is one new poem. There's a bunch of new art. I worked with an incredible artist named Kelly Leahy Radding, and she did new art for the second edition as well. And so there's new poem, and then there's an epilogue that is sort of the 5-year reflection on my experience of having gone through this, and relevant to a lot of things that we've chatted about, this question of, well, who did I become and why did I become that in going through this process? I mean, as somebody who I was not somebody who had writing a book on their bucket list. This was not part of the plan at all. And yet it has turned out to be one of the more important, pivotal things that I've done, and I feel is important for me as in my growth as a person, and then also hopefully, the impact I can have in helping other people get closer to understanding themselves and having the opportunity to express themselves too.
Yeah.
Just out of curiosity, were you a writer in the sense of writing every day, journaling? Did you have, I guess I will say experience with writing, but just from a personal perspective, were you a writer before you picked up the pen to start this project?
No, I really wasn't. I wasn't somebody who ever journaled. I wasn't very comfortable writing. I mean, I'd done school writing, but the
Mm,
kind of writing I had done in school was always, classic grammar and very boxed in, right or wrong. And, unlike how my children learned to write, which Columbia Writers Program, or get your ideas out on the paper and we'll clean
yeah.
it up. It was very, very different from how I was taught writing. And I was certainly influenced by their English classes going through high school.
Hmm.
But it was Julia Cameron's The Artist Way that got me writing every morning when COVID started and I had a little bit more time. I really wanted to do something creative. And so I had thought, well, maybe I'll make jewelry or sculpt. And I
Mm.
think had it not been lockdown, I would have taken a class or done something, but I had no skills and no tools and no experience. So I really needed to do something else. So I started writing. And if you've read The Artist's Way, her primary suggestion is morning pages, which is writing 3 pages every morning before speaking or doing anything else. And that was where it all started. And
Wow.
actually, the title Morning Leaves is also a nod to morning pages and
Mm,
play on words of mourning and mourning grief and leaves
mm.
of the tree and leaves of books and leaving and staying. And so that was where that.
I love that. I love that I love the story. I mean, that you weren't even a writer and you sat down with blank pages. I think that in and of itself takes bravery, frankly,
For sure.
because so many people just won't because it's so uncomfortable to look at a blank page and not know where to start.
Mm-hmm.
And you also talk about accessing a half conscious state through your morning writing, right? A place where that deeper truth, as you mentioned, emerges. I too sit in the quiet at the very, very early, now earlier than I would like because I'm picking up earlier, hours of the wee morning to just sit in the quiet and sit with it and write. And there's no agenda. But I'm wondering, midlife often brings a shift from doing to listening to being in that space. And I'm wondering what that quiet space helped you to hear about yourself. Just maybe you can pull out a little bit of nuggets there for us. What did you hear when you sat in that space?
So, particularly when working on this book, I was highly influenced by spending a lot of time outdoors because of lockdown. One of the only things that I was doing was going for walks outside. I live in Southern California. It's really beautiful, and having access to places on foot that normally in Southern California you would never be able to walk. I was able to see and appreciate this beautiful nature. And I don't know if you remember how clear the skies were. I mean, not having any pollution meant that the skies were this, crystal clear electric blue, and the flowering trees and plants and the vistas. We could see the ocean, we could see mountains. It was just extraordinary. So I was really flooded with those images. And I, I don't know how to explain this better than just how it was. I would wake up every morning and just have this sense of today I am a palm tree. And then
Mm.
I would think about the elements of a palm tree and where they aligned with things that I was thinking and experiencing. And it just kept going day after day after day. I would have these different sort of almost auditory kind of visions that I would just hear things that I would write down. And I felt like a lot of it was just channeling something that it wasn't very conscious writing. I talk about the introduction and the conclusion were like post coffee writing, which were very intellectual and more academic kind of writing. The poetry was really in this very fuzzy state where I was more just letting things flow through me. And some of it was complete garbage, and some of it turned out to be really special to me. So there was a little bit of editing in that as well. But it, I do think that that is a very special state of
Mhm.
mind to be in, and when one can be relaxed and calm and tap into it. I don't know where it all comes from, but one can learn things about themselves that is maybe a bit less varnished than
Mm,
other times of the day.
yeah. And I think you mentioned joy. I think that it can bring joy. It brings a little bit of that quiet peace and joy to the day when you can enter that creative space versus that intellectual doing space.
Yeah,
I imagine that there's probably studies done somewhere that can attest to the dopamine rush maybe that we get when we do that. But I love that. And you mentioned imagining yourself as the palm tree as you were on your walks. Can you talk a little bit about the metaphors in your book? As Kim, you said your favorite was which one?
My favorite was the black-eyed Susan rising through the concrete.
Yeah, because I think that we could use, I love metaphors, and I think that we can use metaphors to help other women feel
sure,
like those emotional archetypes, right, that women move
sure.
through in midlife. So, can you talk a little bit about your
Sure. What,
metaphors?
first, I'll read the poem because I think it's relevant to what I was grappling with, at least to a certain degree at that time. So it's called Palm. I'm a skinny palm on the cliff's edge, heavy winds beating on me day after day, pushing me to their will, bending, flexing, enduring. I am marveled at for the shape that I take on, arched and distorted, I'm sorry, arched and contorted, distorted by the tireless assault.
Hmm. Hmm.
So that, vision of, the tree that is, sort of perched out there. And I was experiencing some of that, of just everything coming at me, and this sense of maybe I need to get out of this situation where it just is constantly pushing me, and maybe that's not
Hmm.
maybe that's not best for me. So um and then I'll read I also like the Black-Eyed Susan. I I think of it as my sort of girl power poem. Let's see, where is it?
Oh, well, now you have to read it.
I
Yep.
know. Well,
That's my favorite.
Okay.
So it's called Black-Eyed Susan. Oh, really? You thought that you could keep me down by covering me with inches of concrete? I will crack your confidence and rise up right through the middle of your nonsense.
I love that.
This is the art.
Yep. So
Oh,
the art
that
is
is
just
so
spectacular.
good. I know now we're
Yeah.
going to just have to get the book for the art, but I do love metaphors.
Oh,
And
the
the
palm tree.
palm, yeah.
Hey, for our listeners, she's showing us pictures from her book, which if you go over to our YouTube channel, you'll be able to see it. But the art in this is
It is
just
beautiful. Yeah.
beautiful. Um, so many women describe midlife as a burning down of what
Mm.
no longer fits for them. And in your poem Scorched, which maybe you can read that, you describe the collapse and then the smallest green sprout of renewal, which is kind of what I think about the Black-Eyed Susan, right? Pushing up. But what green sprouts moments do you see women overlooking in the chaos of their midlife transitions?
Well, the great thing about being a woman is that you're incredibly resourceful, right? And that you've got these experiences and talents. And I think it's sort of nonsense that men say that women can't, or that people can't, multitask. I just think that's baloney. We multitask all the time. And so women have all of this ability. And I think sometimes culturally we get boxed in and are limited or told that we can't do things. And particularly, the stage we're at, where our kids are, up or almost out of the house. Sudden we're freed up, and to be able to look inside ourselves and say, well, what do I want? And what could I do? And to be able to stay curious and open and willing to try things. Those are the best green sprouts to me. I mean, I'm trying a whole bunch of things these days. I just did glass blowing, and I'm
Mm.
trying to do all these fun things that I never had time to do when I was doing more corporate stuff. And I love it. It's really fun. And I mean, I'm not going to be a glass blower, but I
Who knows?
sure had a great time.
Yeah, who
Not to be
knows? Yeah.
a poem writer either.
We
Right.
hear that a lot, though. I mean, when with our podcast guests, we hear women in midlife just trying new things, and or either trying brand new things like that, or they're going back to their childhood, right? Asking
Mhm.
themselves, "What did I enjoy when I was a young girl, or when I was in my 20s? What did I used to do?" And finding their way back to that person.
Yeah,
Kind of a
absolutely.
coming home, I think, is what our last guest described it as, and it can be really fun and powerful, empowering, right?
Yes.
For
Yes.
us to do that, yeah.
Yes. Well, and to take, I'm still advising small companies. And so to be able to just take on the projects for me that I really love and I feel passionate about,
Mm,
either I
yeah,
particularly love the founder and their vision, or the product I think is particularly interesting, or whatever it is, it's to be able to take my experiences. I'm on the board of two nonprofits, Feeding San Diego, which, needless to say, with all the SNAP issues
Mhm.
this
yeah.
year, has been very important and value. It feels good to be involved with something like that. And then I'm also now on the board of an organization called Empowered Endings, the Empowered Endings Foundation, and they do support and care for caregivers around the end of life. So making
Oh,
sure that,
wow.
you know, both practitioners, nurses, hospice, death doulas, physicians, and family members, that they have good resources
Yeah,
and
yeah.
education. And so, to be able to use the things that I have done, and your listeners have done many, many years of cool and important things, and then to be able to go, okay, now I've got these skills in my toolbox. How am I going to make the world better? How am I going to improve my community? How am I going to give back? I think that that's such an important and fun way
Mm,
to find
yeah.
meaning, and it feels so good. And so that
Yeah, I
that
completely agree. It can be fun. And this is the message that we send all the time, that midlife is not a death sentence. Midlife is actually a wonderful time in our lives where we get to redefine, we get to come home, we have more time for ourselves. And it can be really, really exciting.
Mhm.
And I love what you're doing. I can't wait to get my hands on the book and read all of the poems because I'm a very visual person, as the audience knows by now. We're running out of time, but we did start the podcast by talking about the introduction in your book. So I want to come to the epilogue that you wrote in your book. One unexpected gift of loss is clarity. And midlife often delivers that same clarity, but sometimes it can deliver it in a painful way. And I'm wondering what clarity this chapter of your life gives you that you might not have seen otherwise.
Mhm. Certainly, with the loss of my sister, the notion that isn't so surprising is life is short and you don't know. And she died so suddenly at 46. And therefore, it's this, don't put things off. If there's something that one wants to do, be it, project, or work wise, or travel, or writing a book, that this is a really important time to be doing it, and to be leaving behind whatever it is that we all want to leave behind, and have the sort of meaning and beauty that is associated with that kind of life. I think that's where we really do find our joy.
Mhm. We don't know how long our runway is, do we?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it's time for us to take back. It's time to take care of ourselves. It's time to come home, find joy. I love that you mentioned that. It's just time. I guess we'll leave it there. It's just time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Your
We,
final lines of your book say, grow wild, bloom bright, listen carefully. It feels like that's a prescription, right? What are you going to
mm,
do in midlife? Where did those words come from, and what does that mean to you?
Mm.
mm.
So in writing the book, I felt like I started out by saying, let's go walk through the garden of my imagination. And so it sort of ends the walk with something a little bit poetic that brings it back to this notion of, do what you want to do, be yourself, be that bright wildflower, be everything that you possibly can be. And don't forget and listen to yourself, listen to the universe, and do it now. And so that's my hope for people, is that they feel more comfortable taking the kinds of risks that we all have to take to really be ourselves and shine as big and bright as we can, and that we are wise enough to listen to ourselves to do it.
That's beautiful.
It is beautiful. And we always ask our guests the very last question, what the best piece of advice you've ever received. I feel like that could be best piece of advice I've received this week. So, but we will ask you the reverse. What is the best piece of advice you have ever received?
I think that the best piece of advice was from a friend of mine in high school who introduced me to this notion of taking care of my body, and which sounds so funny, but I think when you're a teenager, you're not necessarily thinking about these things. And she got me on a really good path, that we have this one body to take care of, this one sort of spirit and soul, and to put our time and energy into it. And I'm really grateful that, I'm sure she has no idea that she had that kind of impact, but it really changed how I thought about things. And I think the notion of self-care is so critical, because if one can take care of themselves, then they're in the position to both express themselves, but also take care of others and give back. And that's really important for our resilience and making meaning. And
Oh, it's beautiful.
It is
I also think it's timely, right? As you start thinking about what are your intentions for next year, and how are you going to move into the new year, and what does that look like? Really taking care of who you are, body, mind, and soul. That's a beautiful way to end this. I think this might be our last podcast recording this year.
Yeah, I think it's a great way to end the year. So this is fantastic. We call it radical self-care. So, and not, going to the spa for a week, although that sounds really, really great.
Okay.
But really taking care of yourself, and the time is
day
now.
in, day out kind of habit is so important.
Yeah. Because we matter, and we're worthy. So
And we have this one precious life.
exactly.
Well, Laing, what a joy. Thank you so much for bringing your wisdom, your experience, your spirit and mind to this work. I think it's beautiful, and we really appreciate you taking the time to be with us today.
Yeah. Thank you, Laing.
Thank you. And thank you for what you're doing. It's great for all of us women to be getting your insights. So appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you so much. And listeners, until we meet again, that's a wrap. Go find joy in the journey. Take care.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you for listening to the Midovia Menopause Podcast. If you enjoyed today's show, please give it a thumbs up, subscribe for future episodes, leave a review, and share this episode with a friend. Midovia is out to change the narrative. Learn more at midovia.com. That's MIDOVIA.com.